The sound of splintering wood and crunching metal pierced the air like a thunderclap, shattering the tranquility of the suburban cul-de-sac. Jake rushed out of his front door, heart pounding, to find his carefully constructed cedar fence lying in a heap on the ground. And standing amidst the wreckage, a triumphant grin plastered across her face, was his neighbor Karen. "What the?" Jake sputtered, his words catching in his throat as he surveyed the damage. "Karen, what have you done?" Karen strode toward him, her expression unrepentant. "That eyesore of a fence was blocking my view," she declared, her voice dripping with self-righteousness. "I had to do something about it." Jake's jaw dropped open in disbelief. "But it was fully approved by the Homeowners Association," he protested. "I had it surveyed and everything. This is vandalism." Karen scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "I don't care about your silly rules and regulations. I deserve an unobstructed view, and I'll do whatever it takes to get it." Fury bubbled up within Jake, and he clenched his fists, struggling to maintain his composure. "You can't just destroy my property because you feel entitled to a better view," he exclaimed. "There are proper channels to address this kind of issue." "Proper channels?" Karen sneered. "Those are for the weak-willed and the cowardly. I take matters into my own hands, and I always get what I want." She turned on her heel and sauntered back to her house, leaving Jake to stare in disbelief at the ruins of his once pristine fence. As the initial shock wore off, Jake's anger quickly morphed into determination. This was not the end of the story. He would not let Karen's blatant disregard for the rules and his property go unchallenged. Gritting his teeth, he marched back into his house, already formulating a plan to hold Karen accountable for her reckless actions. The battle lines had been drawn, and Jake knew that he was in for the fight of his life. Karen's sense of entitlement had pushed her too far, and he was determined to make her understand that her behavior had consequences. The stage was set for a clash of wills that would test the very fabric of their neighborhood. With a deep breath, Jake set to work, determined to document every aspect of Karen's vandalism. He carefully surveyed the damage, taking meticulous photographs and measurements to build his case. Next, he retrieved the original permits and approvals for the fence, meticulously organizing the paperwork to demonstrate that his actions had been fully compliant with the Homeowners Association's rules. As he gathered the evidence, Jake couldn't help but feel a sinking sense of dread. Karen was not the type of person to back down easily, and he knew that she would likely try to wriggle her way out of the consequences. But he was equally resolute in his determination to hold her accountable. Grabbing his phone, Jake placed a call to the local police department. The officer who answered the call listened intently as Jake described the incident and promised to dispatch a patrol car to the scene immediately. With that crucial first step taken, Jake turned his attention to the Homeowners Association. The association president, a stern-faced retiree named Mrs. Wilkins, was appalled to hear of Karen's actions. "That woman has been a thorn in our side for years," she muttered, her brow furrowing in frustration. "But this is the last straw. We'll be issuing her a citation and imposing hefty fines for the destruction of property." As Mrs. Wilkins rattled off the details of the impending penalties, Jake felt a glimmer of satisfaction. Karen's sense of entitlement was about to be dealt a serious blow, and he couldn't help but relish the thought of her comeuppance. But just as he was about to hang up, Mrs. Wilkins' voice took on a more somber tone. "I must warn you, Jake," she said, "Karen is not one to go down without a fight. She's got a history of fighting our decisions tooth and nail, and she's not afraid to play dirty. You'd best be prepared for a long and arduous battle." Jake's stomach twisted with a mixture of trepidation and determination. "I'm ready for whatever she throws at me," he declared. "This time, Karen has gone too far, and I'll stop at nothing to make her pay for her actions." With that, he ended the call, his mind racing as he contemplated the challenges that lay ahead. The stage was set for a showdown of epic proportions, and Jake was determined to emerge victorious, no matter the cost. The sound of a siren pierced the air as the police car pulled up to the curb, its lights flashing. Jake watched with a mix of relief and trepidation as the two officers stepped out and approached him. "Mr. Harris?" the taller officer inquired, his brow furrowed. "We received a call about a case of property destruction. Can you tell us what happened?" Jake quickly recounted the events, his words tumbling out in a rush as he described Karen's brazen actions and the destruction of his carefully constructed fence. The officers listened intently, their expressions growing increasingly grim. "This is a serious matter," the shorter officer declared, shaking her head. "We'll need to speak with your neighbor and inspect the damage. Can you point us in her direction?" With a nod, Jake led the way to Karen's house, his heart pounding in his chest. As they approached the front door, he could feel the tension in the air, thick and palpable. The taller officer rapped sharply on the door, and a few moments later, it swung open to reveal a smug-looking Karen. "Officers," she greeted them, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "What can I do for you?" "Ma'am, we've received a report that you've destroyed your neighbor's property," the female officer stated, her tone stern. "We need you to come with us and provide a statement." Karen's eyes narrowed, and her expression hardened. "Destroyed property?" she scoffed. "I have no idea what you're talking about. I haven't done anything wrong." Jake stepped forward, his jaw set with determination. "That's not true, Karen," he interjected, his voice laced with anger. "You deliberately destroyed my fence, and I have the evidence to prove it." Karen's gaze shifted to Jake, and her eyes flashed with a mixture of fury and contempt. "Your precious fence was an eyesore," she spat. "I was doing the entire neighborhood a favor by getting rid of it." The officers exchanged a pointed look, and the taller one cleared his throat. "Ma'am, that's not for you to decide. You've committed a criminal act, and you'll need to come with us to the station to provide a formal statement." Karen's face contorted with rage, and for a moment, Jake thought she might lash out at the officers. But then, a sly smile crept across her lips, and she stepped back, holding up her hands in a gesture of surrender. "All right, officers," she purred. "I'll come with you. But I can assure you, this is all just a misunderstanding. You'll see that I'm the real victim here." As Karen was led away, Jake felt a surge of triumph, but the victory was short-lived. He knew that the battle was far from over, and that Karen was not the type to go down without a fight. In the days that followed, Jake's life was consumed by a flurry of legal paperwork and courtroom appearances. Karen had wasted no time in hiring a high-powered attorney, and the battle lines were drawn. At the first hearing, Karen's lawyer launched a scathing attack, accusing Jake of erecting the fence solely to spite his neighbor and block her view. He argued that the fence was an unnecessary eyesore that had diminished the value of Karen's property. Jake's heart raced as he listened to the accusations, but he remained steadfast, presenting the meticulously documented evidence that proved the fence was fully approved and legally constructed. The judge, a no-nonsense older woman, listened intently, her brow furrowing as she weighed the arguments. When it was Jake's turn to speak, he poured his heart into his testimony, describing the painstaking process of obtaining the necessary permits and following the homeowners association's guidelines. He emphasized how the fence not only provided privacy and security for his family, but also enhanced the overall aesthetic of the neighborhood. Karen's lawyer tried to interrupt and object, but the judge silenced him with a stern glare. "I've heard enough," she declared, her voice cutting through the tension in the courtroom. "It's clear that Mr. Harris followed all the proper procedures in constructing his fence. Ms. Karen, your actions were a clear violation of the law, and you will be held accountable." A triumphant grin spread across Jake's face, but it quickly faded as the judge continued, her expression grave. "However, given the ongoing dispute between the two parties, I'm issuing a restraining order against Ms. Karen. You are to have no further contact with Mr. Harris or his property, and you will be responsible for the full cost of repairing the fence. Failure to comply will result in severe penalties." Karen's face twisted with fury, and she shot a venomous glare in Jake's direction. But as the bailiff escorted her out of the courtroom, Jake couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. He had won the first round, but he knew that the war was far from over. As he left the courthouse, Jake couldn't help but wonder what Karen's next move would be. She had proven herself to be a formidable opponent, willing to bend the rules and fight dirty to get what she wanted. But Jake was equally determined to protect his rights and his property, no matter the cost. The stage was set for a prolonged and bitter battle, and Jake steeled himself for the challenges that lay ahead. As the weeks passed, Jake's victory in the courtroom did little to curb Karen's relentless campaign against him. True to the judge's warning, she maintained her distance, but her presence loomed large over the neighborhood, a constant reminder of the festering conflict. Jake had initially hoped that the legal ruling would serve as a deterrent, but Karen proved to be a master of subterfuge. She began waging a silent war, using underhanded tactics to make his life a living hell. It started with the small things: anonymous complaints to the homeowners association of the condition of his property, false accusations of noise violations, and even an attempt to have his dog declared a dangerous breed. Jake found himself spending countless hours defending his actions and his family's well-being, all while trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy. But just when he thought he had weathered the storm, Karen escalated her attacks, striking at the heart of his family's security and peace of mind. One night, as Jake and his wife, Sarah, were preparing for bed, a loud crash shattered the silence. Rushing to the window, they were horrified to see that the newly installed fence had been reduced to splinters once again, with Karen's triumphant silhouette retreating into the darkness. "That's it," Jake fumed, his hands trembling with rage. "I'm not going to let her get away with this." Ignoring Sarah's pleas for caution, he stormed out of the house, determined to confront his nemesis. He knew that he was playing into Karen's hands, but the fury coursing through his veins blinded him to the consequences. As he approached Karen's door, he could feel his heart pounding in his ears. Without hesitation, he began pounding on the frame, his voice resonating through the quiet neighborhood. "Karen, I know you're in there. Come out and face me, you coward." The sound of the door creaking open sent a shiver down Jake's spine, but he refused to back down. Karen's smug expression only served to stoke the flames of his anger. "So, the big bad neighbor wants to play rough, does he?" She purred, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I'm afraid I don't have time for your petty games, Jake. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a fence to destroy." Before Jake could react, Karen slammed the door in his face, leaving him seething with impotent rage. In that moment, he realized that he had fallen right into her trap, and the consequences of his actions could be dire. As he trudged back to his shattered fence, Jake knew that the battle lines had been drawn, and the war was about to escalate in ways he could never have imagined. The confrontation with Karen had left Jake feeling shaken and off balance, but he refused to let her reign of terror continue unchecked. Determined to take the fight back to his adversary, he began plotting his next move. After a long night of poring over legal documents and strategizing with his wife, Sarah, Jake decided to take a bold step. He would fight fire with fire, using Karen's own tactics against her. The next morning, Jake rose early and set out to gather evidence of Karen's misdeeds. He scoured the neighborhood, meticulously documenting every instance of her disturbing behavior, the anonymous complaints, the false accusations, and of course, the wanton destruction of his property. Armed with this damning evidence, Jake marched to the Homeowners Association's office, determined to hold Karen accountable for her actions. The association president, Mrs. Wilkins, listened intently as Jake laid out his case, her brow furrowing with each new revelation. "This is an outrage," Mrs. Wilkins exclaimed, her voice trembling with indignation. "Ms. Karen has repeatedly violated our bylaws and disrupted the peace of this community. Enough is enough." With a resolute nod, Mrs. Wilkins set to work, drafting a sweeping set of sanctions against Karen. fines, probation, and even the threat of expulsion from the association. Jake watched with a grim sense of satisfaction as the noose tightened around his neighbor's neck. But just as he was about to leave, Mrs. Wilkins raised a cautionary hand. "I must warn you, Jake," she said, her voice low and serious. "Karen is not going to take this lying down. You've struck a blow at the very heart of her sense of entitlement, and she's not going to forgive you for it." Jake's jaw tightened, his resolve unwavering. "I'm ready for whatever she throws at me," he declared. "I won't back down, not this time." As he left the association's office, Jake couldn't help but feel a surge of triumph. Karen's reign of terror was about to come to an end, and he would be the one to bring her down. But deep down, he knew that the battle was far from over. The stakes had been raised, and both sides were gearing up for an all-out war. The shockwaves from Jake's decisive action reverberated through the neighborhood, and Karen's reaction was as swift as it was predictable. Within days, the Homeowners Association was inundated with a barrage of appeals, lawsuits, and counter-accusations, all of them bearing Karen's fingerprints. Jake watched with a mixture of dread and determination as the legal battle intensified. Karen had brought in a team of high-powered attorneys, each one seemingly more cunning and ruthless than the last. They attacked the association's policies, questioned the validity of the sanctions, and even attempted to have the entire matter moved to a higher court. But Jake refused to be intimidated. With the unwavering support of his wife, Sarah, and the backing of the Homeowners Association, he fought back with equal ferocity. He pored over legal documents, meticulously countering every argument and finding loopholes in Karen's strategies. The courtroom became a battlefield, with both sides hurling accusations and evidence at each other in a dizzying display of legal maneuvering. Jake's heart pounded with each new development as he watched the stakes continue to rise. And then, just when it seemed that the conflict had reached a stalemate, a new twist emerged. Karen, in a desperate bid to turn the tide, began targeting Jake's personal life, dragging his family into the fray. First, it was anonymous complaints to his employer, alleging misconduct and poor work performance. Then, there were rumors circulated through the neighborhood, painting him as an unstable and dangerous individual. Jake watched in horror as his carefully constructed life began to unravel, all because of Karen's relentless pursuit of vengeance. Determined to protect his family, Jake redoubled his efforts, pouring every ounce of his energy into the fight. He knew that he was treading on dangerous ground, but the thought of Karen's triumphant smirk fueled his resolve. He would not back down, no matter the cost. As the battle raged on, the neighborhood became a battleground, with the residents torn between supporting Jake and appeasing the increasingly erratic Karen. The once peaceful cul-de-sac had become a war zone, and the outcome hung in the balance. As the legal battle raged on, the once peaceful neighborhood descended into a state of chaos. Karen's relentless attacks on Jake's personal and professional life had taken a heavy toll, and the strain was beginning to show. Jake spent countless hours in court, his energy and resources dwindling with each passing day. Meanwhile, Karen's legal team continued to throw up roadblocks, seemingly unfazed by the mounting evidence against their client. Just when it seemed that all hope was lost, a glimmer of light appeared on the horizon. A chance encounter with a neighbor, one who had previously been intimidated by Karen's bullying tactics, led to a breakthrough. The neighbor, a soft-spoken retiree named Mrs. Peabody, revealed that she had witnessed Karen's late-night vandalism of Jake's fence. Emboldened by Jake's unwavering stand against Karen's tyranny, she had decided to come forward and expose the truth. With Mrs. Peabody's testimony and the overwhelming evidence that Jake had meticulously compiled, the scales began to tip in his favor. The judge, a no-nonsense individual who had grown weary of Karen's antics, delivered a scathing ruling, imposing heavy fines and a lengthy probation on the now humbled Karen. As the gavel came down, a collective sigh of relief swept through the courtroom. Jake felt a surge of triumph, but it was tinged with a bittersweet note. The ordeal had taken a heavy toll, both emotionally and financially, and he knew that the scars would take time to heal. But as he stepped out of the courthouse, surrounded by a crowd of supportive neighbors, Jake felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had stood his ground against a relentless bully, and he had emerged victorious. The message was clear. In this community, the entitled would not be allowed to trample over the rights of others. As for Karen, her once unassailable sense of entitlement had been shattered, and she slipped away from the public eye, a shadow of her former self. The victory, though hard won, had restored the balance in the neighborhood, and Jake knew that the peace he had fought so hard to protect would now prevail. With a deep breath, he turned his gaze toward the future, determined to rebuild the life he had fought so fiercely to defend. The battle may have been won, but the war against the Karens of the world was far from over.